My name's Konrad Bendzuck. I work for IIT InnoEnergy, and I'm also part of the CIRPASS project. And I will be moderating the first panel session about circular use cases. We've got 4 panelists to the left of me. Directly to the left of me, starting with Mr. Thibaut Wautelet. He is a senior circular economy advisor at Positive ImpaKT and is also part of the CIRPASS project. To the left of him, we've got Mr. Christian Kitazume from the German Environment Agency, the Umweltbundesamt, or short UBA. Left of him, we've got Dr. Johannes Simboeck. He is a project lead for the Battery Pass project and also working for the company acatech. And to the very left, we've got Mr. William Neale. He is an advisor on circular economy for the European Commission and working for DG Environment. In order to not waste any more time, I'll directly jump in with a question for the whole panel. How can the DPP enable circular use cases? So you can maybe pick your favorite use case and highlight how the DPP can support it. Would you like to start?
I'll start because I'm a bureaucrat, not an entrepreneur, and so I can start from a level of abstraction perhaps, and then hopefully some of the other panelists will be able to fill in some more concrete details. I mentioned at the welcome this morning that it's very much about resources, about materials when we talk about the circular economy, and the objective of the circular economy is to keep those materials in functional use for as long as possible at their highest possible value. And really what we have to focus on in circularity is value. It's keeping the value in the system. And that means at all the different stages, when the materials are coming into the economy, the resource efficiency, during the use phase, so ensuring that those materials are used at their highest value for as long as possible and that they're optimized, so things like sharing and so on. And then, of course, when they become waste, and here we're talking not only about ensuring the quantity of waste that is recycled, but the quality of the recyclates that you get out of it. The business cases, the use cases come out of the fact that where there is value, whether it's value creation, value retention, there is potential profits and potential jobs. And as I say, there are circular business opportunities, I think, at all 3 stages that I mentioned. So we can try and get more value from each ton of materials going into production. We can try to ensure that the products last longer. So we've seen a lot about smartphones. If we can extend their life from, if we can double it from 21 months on average to 42 months, or a washing machine from 12 years to 24 years, of course, what you don't waste, you don't have to replace. So you're reducing, on the demand side, our need for those resources. And then when they become waste, as I say, there are big opportunities. And it was interesting actually just seeing the last slide about how difficult it is to get information on recycled content, because we can also look at the demand side there to how we can actually promote recycled content as a means to ensure that there is a predictable demand for recycled materials. So sort of demand pull side, which again it's a big problem for the recycling industry in terms of their investment, that predictability. There's quite a lot of literature on circular business models, the types of models, whether it's to do with the resource efficiency, product life extension, sharing platforms, resource recovery, or providing products as a service. What I think is interesting actually is in the sustainable finance taxonomy, which in relation to circularity, we adopted a delegated act about a year ago. Most of the criteria for saying what is a circular economic activity is related to NACE codes, related to types of economic activity. But there are about 5 which are horizontal, which are related to these different kinds of circular business model. So if you look at something like textiles, there isn't for circularity as yet a set of criteria to say what is circular in the textile sector. But NACE code, I think it's 15 for textiles, is within the remit, along with most kinds of economic activity, for second-hand sales, for recycling, for reuse, all those kinds of business models. So that would be a very good way of sort of gauging what is a circular business model in those senses. Just 4 quick messages that I'd like to get across. One is that we need to think about this not only in terms of the sort of disruptors and the innovators. We need to think of how these models are going to be enhanced and pushed in mainstream industry. We're talking about circular transition, not just a circular niche. Second is the importance of the fact that generally these kinds of circular value retention business cases are delivered close to the consumer, where the product is consumed, so they tend to be creating local jobs. Third is that they rely on, or they will inevitably lead to those putting products on the market taking an interest and responsibility for the product after the sale and throughout its lifetime. And that means, fourthly, being able to identify that product. So really the digital product passport is essential for enabling that. With that, I can come back later.
Maybe I can continue. I picked the use case. Tilman already has touched on it a little bit, what we will be publishing soon. But I picked the residual value assessment of batteries as one of the use cases is really decisive for the second life of batteries. And we already heard why extending a life cycle of a battery is really important, but also the challenges that come with it. I think it's really important to look forward to the implementation and see where are the challenges in getting more concrete, but also delivering the DPP to the end user. And I want to point out also 3 things. So especially, of course, for the batteries, the state of health is very important. But how do you measure it? How do you measure it for different applications? How do you optimize the added value of those data that you collect and do not overshoot with the data that you actually collect? Because especially for the dynamic data, you can update it each 5 seconds to be a little bit far on the spectrum, or you can update it each year. And the question is, where do you really end up with those updating requirements? But those will be decisive for determining the residual value of a battery, because you need a timeline, more or less, of a battery. One point in time doesn't tell you when the battery might take a knee in its performance. So that is a decisive point of standardizing the measurement of data attributes actually for the digital battery passport. The second is also getting the companies to implement it properly, which is how is the battery in terms of connectivity, how will the companies interact with the end users who will provide some personal information most likely when they provide a state of health of the battery, like how have I used the battery, and that will be directly the cause of the current state of the battery. And then a third point, also connecting to the end user, how does the end user understand what is the residual value of the battery? He will have a lot of data, especially for technical aspects of the battery, that you really have to be an expert kind of to be able to determine the residual value. And there will be certainly service providers to do that for you, but also it should be at that point, or at least so far, that you can estimate a little bit about what is the residual value of your battery, so that the DPP actually has added value for the end user. That was 3 points to this use case.
Yeah, I think the end user is very important, not only as the owner of a product, but also as a consumer. And we have to look at the actual data needs of consumers, and in order to really yeah, I think there is a lot of potential if we look at the end users, because we have seen that many consumers actually want to make informed decisions when buying products, and the digital product passport provides a huge opportunity to provide all the important data to them, but the actual information needs might differ not only from product to product, but also from depending on the actual interests of those consumers. And it is a lot of data that can be provided through digital product passports, but these data need to be aggregated in a useful form for end users and consumers in order to allow them to make sustainable purchasing decisions. And I think, therefore, we need to think about how these data can be used by trusted entities such as certification bodies in order to analyze and provide this added value to the consumer. And this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges to provide the correct and useful data. I think our study has shown that the data needs to be reliable and comparable, and I think there is one of the big opportunities in order to present reliable data, in that, for example, repair information can also be used to score repairability of a certain product. If you have data on the actual repair of one product, you can also use this information in order to derive repairability scores or data like that. And I think this is one of the big opportunities.
So I will try not to repeat what was said before and give additional perspective. So one of the typical statement I say that when you go to the recycling center with some products, if you don't know what is inside this product, you put it in the bin, which is then incinerated. So a product without information is a kind of waste, and that's why data is playing a critical role in this transition towards circular economy. And what we have seen from DPP use case analysis is that there is this need to access information from the supply chain, but also to make it accessible. And this should be play in role with the digitalization of businesses. The one who are currently capturing opportunities from the data, that's the one that put in place a digitalization strategy for the company. And that's quite important for any companies. But also, we see the role of data playing a key role for the second-hand market. I took the example previously of the car industry. The second market of the cars has been developed thanks to data access on the history of the car, the maintenance. No one will buy a car without this information. And this is creating trust, and also you need quality data. But you see this parallel in other industry. That information access, when you increase the quality and the access to this information, you enable new business model to be developed. And second-hand is one of the example. We have seen, for example, in the textile industry, and this is happening, that second-hand market is already growing. Brands are concerned about that because this is taking a share of their market. So they try to play a role also there. And one of the key aspects there is to authenticate the product. How do you make sure when you buy a garment that this is really this brand and this has this value? And we see more and more in luxury that they are trying to use traceability system and DPP-like solution to ensure that this product has been made by this brand and has this quality. And this helps really to streamline the data sharing between different actors. So I think this plays a critical role to have data. So I will not spend more time.
Thank you. So earlier today, we briefly touched the topic of greenwashing and how it's important to gain the trust of the consumers through strong ecological declarations. So this question is kind of aimed towards Mr. Kitazume, but the others can also feel free to comment. So, the digital product passport will present various information concerning the environmental performance of the product. Therefore, it's crucial to ensure a level playing field. Which methods should be accepted for these declarations, such as the PEF, the product environmental footprint, or maybe the EPD, the environmental product declaration, should also be accepted? So maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, as I said previously, it is important to have comparable data, and I think the product environmental footprint is one of those data points that can be used to provide comparable data to consumers. But I also think it is important to look at the whole product life cycle, not only at the production of the product and the materials included, and therefore we need to think about how you can actually dispose of products, and I think there it is very important to have data that is relevant to the certain location where a product is used, and how a consumer or an end user can dispose of a product in their certain location. And this is also like this connection to have data on the local legislation, how to dispose of products at a certain place, and also the product data, to bring those two together and find or present a solution for this certain for this special case. This certain situation is one of the opportunities of the product passport.
So maybe like the DPP app, when you scan a product, tells you where the nearest disposal site is, or something like this. Hmm?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a great example of what it can be used to enable. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So the DPP will be adopted by companies of various sizes, ranging from small to big. And I can imagine that the big players already have a extensive IT system in place, so it will be easier for them to implement. But the vast majority of European companies are made up of SMEs. So here's a question for Mr. Neale. In what ways can European funding and policies support companies and SMEs in adopting circular economy principles facilitated by the DPP?
Well, thanks very much. SMEs do have particular challenges, and I think that one of the problems that we have is we can't just say to companies you have to go circular, because there are 1,000 different ways to go circular. And as I said earlier on, we're talking about mainstream businesses, not just the disruptors. We have to make sure that some of the lessons that have been learnt, some of the good practice experiences are generally spread out. And one way that we would intend to do that is through the idea of a European circular business hub, which could ensure that some of those best practices are spread on the ground. Again, doing that from Brussels is not really feasible, especially if we're talking about SMEs. We need to be on the ground doing that through local business organisations, chambers of commerce, and so on. But if I could come back to what was said before about trust, I mean, I think trust is an important word. We saw it in Steve's presentation, and I think this goes. I mean, I think trust is very important for maintaining value, because it's very much of the information that is going to be made available. If it's not trusted, then it's not going to help to maintain that value. And I think this goes down to why we are talking about a European regulation for digital product passport, rather than all. I mean, the concept has kind of been proved by the number of examples that we've seen and that have been referred to. But if you take Kranzberg's first law of technology, he said technology is neither good nor bad nor neutral. The same for digital technology. It can be used for accelerating linear and sustainable economic development, or it can be used to enable circularity. And this is why I think that we need to have this sort of policy instrument, the regulation, to ensure that certain types of information are made available and that they can be trusted, because they will be verifiable. So I think this trust aspect is extremely important. I think that we should also remember that many of the environmental footprinting methods and so on would be established in the delegated acts according to the different product groups, but also many of the areas that aren't covered directly through the passport would come under our green claims initiative. So we would any claims that are being made would normally have to be verifiable according to that ongoing, it's under negotiation still, but through the green claims initiative.
Thanks. Maybe we could also have a look at the battery sector a little more in detail. So this is a question for Johannes Simboeck. As a project leader for the Battery Pass project, how do you see the DPP facilitating the transition towards a more sustainable and circular economy in the battery sector?
I think one of the major parts I already mentioned earlier, won't repeat that, but of course there are more use cases to battery DPP, especially recycling or the servicing of batteries, where we have the information then on how to actually handle the battery, the manual, how can you remove it from the car, how can you disassemble the battery itself safely, especially, so that this will be a process, of course, to build it into the processes at recyclers or other handlers of battery. But this, over the years, should, I think, reduce also the cost included in recycling, in handling the battery, and then enable also repairing batteries. So I think there's a huge potential for circular economy within the battery passport. I think one of my major thoughts is how to reach the potential, actually. And I mentioned some of the things before in my example in the use case, where we see challenges to really getting to this added value of the DPP. And I think we heard it in the intro today from Michele Galatola, that we are at a critical juncture, and the juncture will really extend far in the future with the secondary legislation. I think we see in the battery regulation that we do have a lot of data attributes written there. We did our best to interpret them, but in the end we don't make the rules, but the Commission does, as we also heard today. And I think it's also very important to stick closely to provide actually the concrete requirements for companies. I mentioned the updating, this definition of what does updating the battery passport must be defined, and it must be defined early so that companies do not have to implement it within 3 months or so. And so that is a little bit of a thought of mine, how to really get to the added value of the DPP that I think is does not yield any discussion whether there is any potential, but how to actually reach it and how to reach it good.
Thanks. So you mentioned the added benefit. I was just wondering how big, how much of an impact second life applications will actually play in the future when you also think about safety requirements or who's responsible for potential accidents?
Potential accidents, let me begin differently. So of course, different applications require quite different systems of batteries. So that must be aware that if you have a stationary battery application, that is quite different from an EV that you have before in terms of cooling system, in terms of also performance of the battery that is required. So there is, of course, a change going there. And for batteries especially, a gray zone, how will the battery market develop over the next 10 years? So batteries that are on the market now with a performance might be outdated in 5 years in that application. We don't know exactly, right? We have solid state batteries coming up, we have sodium batteries potentially coming up. So their increase in performance will be a challenge, maybe also to secondary application of batteries, because they have then to compete with the best technology down the road in 10 years. Nonetheless, I think it's really important to have then the usage data of the battery. If you know this battery has well ahead a lot of lifetime, then you can still think about using it. It will still be an uphill battle if you have a battery that has much more performance and is a new battery. But I think there's potential, and but of course there's a gray zone, as with all the economic development that is coming up in the battery sector. So not a distinctive answer there, sorry.
No problem, thank you. Maybe we can take a step back a little and watch at the circular economy adaptation in general. So it's a question for Thibaut. In your experience, what are key factors for successful implementation of circular economy strategies in both private and public sectors?
So I think one of the key factors is data. If I take the example of the public sectors, we have done some extensive work in Luxembourg. In one area is the procurement. We have developed a national platform to stimulate circular procurement among the public sectors. And you need to collect information from the different suppliers. You could use labels, but it's sometimes difficult to compare them. And their data plays a key role in the decision making when you want to buy more sustainable, but also to provide some indicators. Where are you within this, within your organization, but also in terms of sustainable purchase, you need to have some indicators what you should target. Another example in the public sectors, it's also the construction. Luxembourg will be, to my knowledge, the first country in Europe to make mandatory to have a digital registry for new buildings by 2025. So each new buildings will need to have a kind of digital product passport for the building, so inventory of materials declaration there. And there it will be also critical to harmonize. How do you collect this information? Because building, there are various types of products, so how do you make sure that at a national level you got something comparable between the different type of buildings? And also how do you facilitate the life of architects, designer, or also product construction to provide this information. So, and this is critical to get this information for enabling renovation to valorize the product at the end of life of or after a first cycle of use. From a company's perspective, I think you will face, in any case, sustainability regulation. So we mentioned previously EU taxonomy. So we see already with companies that they are concerned about how they are investing in companies. You will see with the CSR, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, even if you're SME, you will be facing that you need to collect information from your supply chain, but also at the company level. So you need to have some indicators, some data to drive this strategy. And 3 success factors I could name, or even 4. The first is to see that you need to have a digitalization strategy in place. This is quite critical. It's not just an environmental initiative, DPP or data or circular economy. What we have seen from frontrunners is that they have implemented cross-functional teams inside the company. So it was not just governmental affairs or environmental eco-design. I've been sitting in meetings with companies who were from 10 different departments within the organization. So they are already preparing for the DPP because they see that we need IT, we need business, we need eco-design, we need procurement there because you need to collect information from the supply chain. So this is quite important to see that it's quite a change of working within the organization that needs also to happen. The last one is, well, the third one is more transition, I would say, because you are not moving from totally changing your business model to a totally circular from day 1 to day 2. So you need to see this as a step-by-step process, also for the digitalization, to really to plan that. And one of the enablers that we have seen, do not reinvent the wheel by creating your own standard or your own product data sheet for collecting information. There are standards there. So look at this standard, try to leverage this to facilitate the life of your suppliers, so you will get information more easily, but also for your customers, so they could leverage this data more easily.
Thank you. So I see already our time is running out, so if it's okay for you, I would like to ask one last question and just really quickly want to know if there's already thoughts on this about, well, the DPP will of course streamline processes, but it will obviously also create some sort of overhead. So how can we ensure that the benefit that the DPP brings is not offset by all the extra effort, like the extra generated data and running servers, which are also polluting, set off, because there might be huge amounts of data being generated?
Well, of course, through the delegated acts, we'll have impact assessments, and this kind of thing will have to be looked into. So I would think that it's really a case-by-case basis. That's a short answer.
Yeah, short and concise answer. I like that. Okay, looking at the time, and I think we got most of the questions.
I think we're done. Thank you. Okay, so thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Konrad.